So the second main way, so the first one we had goals, sort of how are the movements different from one another. The second main way I think the movements are really different from each other is that the first and second wave really had the right way to be a feminist. So there was one right way to be a feminist. People were pretty judgy of others. The first wave, we'll call them our foremothers, our grandmothers, our ancestors. And if you remember in the film when Alice Paul told Senator Layton's wife, "You women are worse than anti-suffragists, you perpetuate the lie every day at breakfast." So since she's married and, wants to support her husband, she was ruled not the right kind of feminist, right? The second wave, and this is where a lot of our stereotypes come from, and we saw some of these awesomely fun lesbian separatist groups and other kinds of groups, even now, the mainstream groups, but there's an idea that, you really must be a woman-identified woman to be a proper feminist. So our energies must flow towards our sisters, not backwards towards our oppressors. And there's quite a stereotype of feminists being angry, rigid, and not funny, right? Well, they can't take a fucking joke, which that's a whole other topic we'll talk about. But this is sort of, where feminism was at that time, non-compromising. It's all or nothing. You're either with us or against us. The third wave is a little bit more squishy. So the third wave, let's call them the daughters, and I'll tell you more about that on the next slide. They're a little bit more like, hey, loosen up, right? We got some wins. We don't have to be angry all the time now. Life is kind of better for women. It's not perfect. But there's also this notion, I'm sure many of you were best friends with your moms all through your teenage years. For me, it was a normal part of development to fight with my mom. There's a part where I did not want to be my mom. I had to separate from my mom. So if you think of third wave feminism as the daughters, it means we love our moms, but we don't want to be our moms. So if my mom says wear blue, then I want to wear pink, or vice versa. There's a rebelliousness to it. There's a rejection of purity. Like, look, we can't all live perfect lives. And I know that some of you probably are able to do this, but I have a friend who's very, very pure about GMOs and where your food comes from. And those of you know from early in the class, I'm like allergic to everything. And so when I finally am eating something, she would come and she goes, "Are you going to eat that zucchini?" I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Well, you know that's GMO." And I'm like, "It's the last food on earth I'm not allergic to. Let me eat it," So I don't know if you are that person or you know those people, but it's like you got to be perfect, or why bother if you didn't bring your own bag to the store? Like, you get that look, right? So the third wave daughters are like, hey, we try to bring our bags to the store. Sometimes we forget our bags, right? Sometimes we have to buy the bag. Some of them consider themselves bad feminists. Look, we're still feminists. We're just bad feminists. We're bad at doing it perfectly. There's a much greater call for diversity and plurality. I'm not saying third wave has landed, because we're definitely going to look at that later. But the idea that you cannot have a white women's movement and not include women of color and not include the different classes and sexual orientations and everything else is completely blown up in the third wave. There's a notion that there's many, many kinds of feminism. There's many, many ways to be a feminist. So I took this from a book called Feminist Manifesto. Oh, if I can breathe. Okay. Where they say, I'm a power, postmodern, girly, pro-sex, Prada academic, gender radical, Marxist, equity, cyber, Chicana, cultural, eco, lesbian, Latina, womanist, animal, Puerto Rican, working class, Asian American, philanthropic, bisexual, transsexual, lipstick, punk rock, young, old feminist. Meaning these are all different ways to be feminist. They're all going to have different flavors. They're all going to have different focuses, foci, and they're all valid. So we really see this coming out. Okay, here's the judgy versus the bad feminism. So second wave feminists, you have a quote, all men are rapists, and that's all they are, which I'm sure was really made men feel great about the movement. And Naomi Wolf said there's a bad patch in the 80s and 90s when feminist thinking became sort of a monopoly, and developed a series of litmus tests, right? Are you wearing the right shoes or the wrong shoes, and etc. And here you have women all judging each other. Well, they're not even real feminists. That's what led Lady Gaga to say something like this. I'm not a feminist. I hail men. I love men. I celebrate American male culture and beer and bars and muscle cars. Of course, she said since then she is a feminist. But when she thought this here on the left is what being a feminist meant, rejecting men, being anti-everything, then she did not identify with that term. Later on, she came deftly to say, oh, wait, no, I'm absolutely a feminist and passionately a feminist, when she came to understand that it doesn't necessarily mean rejecting all that is male or even all that is hetero. Second, somebody else, Mary Lisa Johnson is literally a sex worker and a feminist scholar. There seems to be a lot of people who either funded their PhDs through sex work or got PhDs because they're sex worker. I don't know, but there's a fascinating literature on it. You guys should check it out. But her quote is, second wave feminism is like a strict teacher who just needs to get laid, meaning like, loosen up a little bit. And if you're not sure if we're still at that place, I show this to show when Wonder Woman came out, is Wonder Woman a feminist film or not? Well, of course. So like I saw it, and like my little 8-year-old inside me, when I saw Wonder Woman standing there in no man's land and blah, blah, I got all teared up and I was like, this is the hero I need. And then you go to the internet and we immediately get into the debate, right? I wish Wonder Woman was as feminist as it thinks it is. Wonder Woman isn't really feminist fantasy, but then other people said it is. 5 wonderfully feminist moments. One way to know whether something's feminist or not, though, is to watch the reactionaries. There's certain reactionary men who thought that Wonder Woman had a secret feminist agenda, which usually makes me feel pretty good that it's feminist at that point. Okay, a perfect example of this clash is Alice Walker and her daughter Rebecca Walker. So Alice Walker, you've probably heard of her. She wrote The Color Purple. If you've had to read any women of color, it was probably her. And she was very passionate Black feminist. And she sort of coined the term womanist to talk about a woman of color being, rich. Womanist is the feminist, as purple is the lavender, meaning there's this rich and dark and beautiful. But Rebecca Walker, her daughter, grew up feeling very not good enough. She felt like she was never going to live up to like her mom's friends, and they were like the most famous sort of feminists and writing the books. And she's like, how am I going to live up to that, right? And she said, she's the one who actually coined the term third wave, saying, it's not that I'm not a feminist, I'm just a different kind of feminist. She says, I felt I could not be a feminist because I'm not strong enough, good enough, not disciplined enough to measure up to an image I had in my mind, what was morally and politically right according to my mom's, or the second wave vision of female empowerment. So she really was a leader in saying, look, can we be feminists differently? Like, you guys did amazing stuff and you paved the way for us, but now as the daughters, can we use it in a different way? I'll stop that one there.